YouTube, what's going on? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. This week we're going to be talking about scanning and developing tips and tricks. I've developed and scanned just countless number of rolls over the year now. Especially during this last, let's say 8 months or so, I've been shooting and developing like crazy since, a lot of us have been home for a lot of the year as well. So anyways, I've picked up a whole bunch of tips and tricks that I want to share with you that I think might help you make things a little bit easier and perhaps remove some of the hassles or kind of the less than efficient things you might be doing right now. So let's jump right into it. The first thing I definitely want to talk about has to do with regulating temperature when developing your film. A lot of you probably use, let's say, a sous vide machine or maybe some other really creative ways to control the water temperature of your chemicals. And I'm here to tell you that A, that's not extremely important, and I know some of you are going to get on me for that. And B, the other thing is I actually do a very simple method that doesn't require any real device like a sous vide machine or anything like that. So if you have a thermometer, which I definitely think everyone should invest in because ultimately it will give you peace of mind, that's enough. In terms of how to actually get your chemicals hot, what I do is I actually put my chemicals in a big bucket and I fill that bucket up with the hottest water possible coming out of my faucet. It can be your bathroom sink, kitchen sink, or even your bathtub, doesn't matter. And use the hottest water possible, water that might even scald you a little bit. It all depends on what comes out of your faucet, but just use the hottest water possible. So you fill up your bucket or your tank all the way up and then put your bottles in there. The bigger the bucket and the more water you have, the longer the temperature will stay stable. And basically you just let your bottles hang out in there for a good, 5 to 10 minutes. I'd say somewhere in the 7-minute mark, pull out your developer, untwist the cap, stick the thermometer in there and see where your temperature is. Perhaps you might be right at where you need to be, which typically I'd say is about 41 Celsius, depending on what kit you're using. Or maybe you need a little bit more, or maybe you need a little bit less. If you need more, then of course, leave your bottle in there and just let it continue hanging. If you need less, then you can just take that single bottle and run it under cold water with the thermometer inside just until the temperature comes down to where you want it. But at that point, your developer is 100% ready to go. And of course, you should have done all the other steps like loading your film and all of that stuff before this step. Because at this point, once your temperature is where it needs to be, you can just start developing right away. And again, I'm not saying don't measure your temperature because you should do that, especially if you have a thermometer. But at the end of the day, getting your chemicals hot enough in a very easy way will remove a lot of the hassle that comes with regulating the temperature. And then of course for your Blix and your stabilizer or, depends, what kind of developing you're doing. Either way, developer is typically the one that's most critical in terms of heat. The rest of them don't really have to be that critical and can be in the ballpark. At least that's what I've found. And my film, from my point of view, hasn't had any real issues when it comes to developing this manner. All right, so the second one that I'm going to talk about here has to do with loading your film onto the reel. So sometimes I have difficulties with this because the film just won't follow the track. And then sometimes it even kind of rolls on itself. And then as you're going through and twisting, eventually it just comes to a hard stop and it kind of ruins everything. What I find to help sometimes is actually cutting the leader off of the film. So, all the film has that initial part of it that's thinner than the rest. And this is for 35 millimeter, by the way. In that case, I would just cut off the thinner part so that all I have is uniform film. And then of course in the dark, I'll go ahead and load it onto the reel. Having the fully uniform film actually helps both sides of it fit in the track properly and then actually roll itself as you twist the little reel contraption. So I highly recommend you try that because I find that it's actually saved me a lot of work and a lot of occasions and also frustration. Think about it. You're in the dark, you're trying to load this film, it's not rolling properly, and that could be the worst experience because you can't turn on the lights or you ruin everything. Therefore, give that a try if you're having problems. Additionally, when it comes to putting film on the reel, I find that having dry reels makes all of the difference. And this might seem kind of obvious because many of you probably haven't developed with wet ones, but if you're developing 10 rolls in one day, like I've done at some times when I come back from a trip, after that first development cycle of 2 rolls, those reels are now just going to be wet the entire time, and therefore letting them dry or at least kind of shaking them around and aerating them a little bit might help a lot because wet reels means that the water will cause the film to kind of stick to it and it'll get a bit rough, and then as you're rotating the reel, it's just not going to be fun and it's going to feel like you're destroying your film, scratching it, all of the above. So if you have multiple reels, then definitely use all of them to ensure that something's always dry when you're putting your film into it. Okay, so this third one is very, very simple, and I bet you've probably heard of this one before. If you're using plastic bottles to store your chemicals, highly, highly recommend that you squeeze those bottles to get all of the air out in between each use. That will make sure that you don't have any kind of stray air in there, and especially oxygen, interacting with the chemicals themselves. It might look a little weird. It also might make the bottle not very stable, but you can figure that part out more easily by just tucking your bottle somewhere that is convenient for you. But definitely make sure to get as much air out of there as possible. Squeezing the bottle is the easy way if you have a plastic bottle. If you don't have a plastic bottle, then you can actually use a wine stopper. And a wine stopper is basically like a plastic cork that you stick on top of your bottle, and then use this other device to suck the air out. Definitely recommend you do that because, again, you don't want any air in there, or at least eliminate as much of it as possible. This will help your chemicals last a lot longer, and therefore you won't have to replace them as often, and you'll save money, you'll contribute less waste, all that good stuff. All right, my next point has to do with scanning. So as you know, I use the Essential Film Holder to hold my film when I'm scanning, and I love the product. Definitely check it out. Here's a video review that I did, and there's an affiliate link below as well. When using the Essential Film Holder, or any film holder for that matter, you have to get above the negative in order to photograph it with your digital camera. Therefore, having it stable and having a place that will hold your camera steady is very important. This could be a bit cumbersome if you don't have one of those copy stands that is extremely convenient. However, if you have a tripod, of course you can hold your camera steady, but even then it might be awkward. So one thing I've learned is to actually lean your tripod against the edge of a table in order to get it not only stable, but also to give you that overhead angle that you're looking for. And to do that, you basically take one leg of the tripod and make it, meaningfully longer than the other two legs, and that way your tripod will lean forward. And of course, at that point, it's not very stable, but when you lean this against a table, especially one that's tucked up against a wall, you'll have a very, very stable base. Having it lean over like that basically then allows you to hang the camera over the edge of that table, pointing down towards the surface flatly. And that's awesome because, again, it will be less awkward. At that point, you can get your camera looking overhead and photographing the negative and not really having anything else get in the way. If you're pointing your camera down with the traditional way of having your tripod be even on all sides and then pointing it down, it's gonna be a bit awkward to get your film holder with your light table and all of that really tucked in up against the camera. So doing the trick where you lean the camera over the edge makes a massive difference. It makes it so much easier to photograph your negatives without having this very awkward, cumbersome setup. To make that even more interesting, you could actually get a longer tripod plate as well. You go on Amazon, they sell tripod plates that are 2-3 times the length of a traditional one, and that then lets you hang your camera out even further without investing in a full kind of boom arm. That tripod plate usually is very inexpensive and it's universal, so just getting one that's maybe 5-6 inches long will go a long way in giving you extra options when it comes to holding your camera over a negative in order to scan it. So what do you think about these tips and tricks? Did you know all of them? Which one surprised you? Let me know in the comments. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was kind of a breeze, but I think these tips might go a long way in helping you scan and develop your film just much more easily with less hassle. That's all I got for you today. So if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and like it. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Peace out, y'all.